wedding right now! Brooke, I never touched your dress.
Brooke, stop! That is my mother!
She has embarrassed this family enough! I only came here for my son.
Mom, please don't leave.
Madam Parker, the board is waiting.
Mom, who are you? Daniel, I am still your mother.
Look what you did to my dress. The bride's voice cut through the ballroom like a breaking glass. Then came the slap, sharp, loud, final. Every head turned, every conversation died. Linda Parker stood in the center of the Grand Harrington Ballroom, with one hand pressed against her cheek. A thin red mark was already rising beneath her fingers. At her feet, a champagne flute trembled on the marble before rolling to a stop. Brooke Whitman, the bride, stood inches from her, in a white satin gown now stained with red wine across the bodice. Her veil shook with every breath. Her eyes were bright but not with tears, with rage. "You ruined the most important day of my life," Brooke said. Linda did not answer right away. She was 60 years old, small-framed, with tired hands and kind eyes that had learned how to survive rooms like this. Her pale blue dress was simple, carefully pressed, bought on sale, chosen because it looked respectful. She had checked the hem twice before leaving home that morning. Now 200 guests stared at her as if she had carried shame into the room with both hands. "I didn't touch you," Linda said quietly. Her voice was steady, but inside something had cracked. Brooke laughed once. It was a cold sound. "You didn't touch me?" she said, turning toward the crowd. "Everyone saw you standing right there. No one spoke. Not the bridesmaids in blush gowns, not the men in black tuxedos, not the hotel staff lined against the wall with silver trays frozen at their sides, and not Daniel." Linda's son stood near the bar, still holding his glass, his face pale with shock. He was 32, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the kind of tuxedo Linda could never have imagined buying when he was a boy. He looked at his mother, then at Brooke, then at the floor. Linda saw it. That small hesitation, that terrible pause. A mother can hear silence from her child louder than any scream. Brooke stepped closer. "You know what this is really about?" she said, her voice rising now, filling the room. "You never belonged here. You've been uncomfortable all night because you know it. Everyone knows it." A woman at a nearby table lowered her eyes. An older man cleared his throat and looked away. Someone whispered, "This is awful," but did nothing. Linda felt the sting in her cheek. She felt the eyes on her dress, her shoes, her small pearl earrings. She felt the old familiar weight of being measured by people who thought money gave them permission to decide who mattered. But she kept breathing. Slow in, slow out. Brooke pointed toward the ballroom doors. "Get out," she said. "Someone like you does not belong at a Whitman wedding." The room went completely still. Linda looked at Daniel again. For 1 second, he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms and pretend he was protecting her. She waited for that boy to come back. She waited for the man to step forward. He did not. So Linda lowered her hand from her cheek. She bent down, picked up the broken stem of the glass, and placed it carefully on a waiter's tray. Even then, she was careful not to leave a mess for someone else to clean. Then she straightened her dress. She lifted her chin and she walked toward the exit. No speech, no scene, no defense. Just footsteps across marble. Behind her, Brooke stood breathing hard, certain she had won. But she had no idea who Linda Parker really was. And she had no idea that outside those gilded doors, a phone call had already been made. A phone call that would bring 3 black cars to the hotel entrance. A phone call that would expose the truth. The woman they had just thrown out of the wedding was not powerless. She was the only living heir to one of the largest private transportation fortunes in the Southeast. Linda did not run. That was the first thing people noticed later, when they tried to remember the moment honestly. She walked through the ballroom doors with her back straight, her cheek burning, her breath held tight behind her ribs. The sound of the reception followed her into the hall, then faded behind the heavy doors like a song being buried. The hallway outside was quiet and bright. Too bright. White marble, gold trim, tall mirrors, flower arrangements so perfect they looked untouched by human hands. A young hotel attendant stood near the wall holding a tray of empty champagne glasses. He had seen her leave. He had seen the mark on her face. For a second, he looked like he wanted to say something. Instead, he lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. Linda stopped. Not because the words fixed anything. They did not. But because he had said them. Because in a building full of polished people, one young man in a black vest had found enough courage to be human. She gave him a small nod. "Thank you," she soughed, tired, still intact. Then she kept walking. Inside the ballroom, Brooke stood in the center of the circle she had created. Her bridesmaids moved toward her, touching the stained satin, murmuring comfort. One of them, a thin, red-haired woman named Paige, glanced toward the doors. "She really left," Paige said quietly. Brooke turned on her. "What was she supposed to do?" Brooke snapped. "Stay after ruining my dress?" Paige looked down at the wine stain. She had been close enough to see Brooke tilt the glass herself, she knew. Her stomach tightened. But she had known Brooke since college. She knew the rules of surviving Brooke. You did not challenge her in public. You smiled. You nodded. You stayed useful. So Paige said nothing. At the far side of the room, Daniel still had not moved. His hand had gone numb around the glass he was holding. He heard voices, but they sounded far away. He saw Brooke's mouth moving. He saw his mother's empty chair near the back wall, the small folded napkin still beside her plate, the water glass still half full. That chair did something to him. It looked abandoned. It looked accused. His father had died when Daniel was a boy. Since then, Linda had been mother, father, safety net, and home. She had missed meals so he could eat. She had taken night shifts and smiled through exhaustion. She had sat in the last row at school concerts because she came straight from work and smelled faintly of laundry soap. And now at his own wedding, she had been treated like trash, and he had watched. Daniel set the glass down too hard. A little champagne jumped over the rim. Brooke saw him and crossed the floor quickly, gathering her dress in both hands. "Daniel," she said, breathless, "please tell me you saw what happened." He looked at her. For the first time all day, he did not see the perfect bride. He saw the raised chin, the controlled tears, the eyes already measuring how much sympathy she had won. "I saw my mother get slapped," he said. Brooke blinked. "She ruined my dress." "Did she?" The question was quiet, but it hit harder than shouting. Brooke's face changed. Just a flicker. Anger first, then alarm. "Are you serious right now?" Daniel looked past her toward the doors. He wanted to go after Linda. His body knew it before his pride did. But shame held him in place. Shame and fear, and the awful weight of realizing he had let other people teach him how to be embarrassed by the woman who raised him. Near the head table, Charles Whitman leaned toward his wife, Margaret. "Get control of this," he said under his breath. Margaret's smile stayed fixed, but her fingers tightened around her pearl clutch. "This is not the time for drama," she whispered. But drama had already entered the room. It had walked in wearing a pale blue dress. It had been seated behind a column. It had been slapped in front of witnesses. And now it was outside, breathing cold night air. Linda stepped through the revolving doors and onto the front drive of the Grand Harrington Hotel. The city moved around her in silver and black. Valet attendants jogged between cars. A siren wailed somewhere far off. Wind touched her cheek and the sting sharpened. For the first time, her face crumpled. Only a little. Only where no one could see. She opened her handbag and reached for her phone. Her fingers brushed an old folded photograph tucked inside the pocket. Daniel at 10 years old, gap-toothed and laughing, holding a paper trophy from a school spelling bee. Linda closed her eyes. "Oh, Tommy," she whispered to the husband she had buried 22 years earlier. "Our boy forgot himself tonight." Then headlights turned the corner. One pair, then another, then a third. 3 black cars rolled into the hotel drive, slow and silent, their polished bodies catching the light like dark water. Linda looked up. Her hand froze inside her bag. The cars stopped in front of her, and every valet on the curb went still. The first door opened before any valet could reach it. A man stepped out in a dark suit, broad across the shoulders, calm in the face, with one hand resting near his jacket button. Then another man stepped out behind him. Then another. They did not hurry. They did not speak. They simply took their places along the curb, the way trained people do when they know exactly why they are there. The hotel entrance changed in an instant. The valet captain straightened. A bellman stopped mid-step with a luggage cart. Two guests smoking near the planter turned and stared. Linda stood beneath the gold awning, her cheek marked, her small handbag open in one hand. She knew what this looked like. She knew what people would think. She had spent decades avoiding this kind of arrival. That was the point. She had chosen ordinary doors, ordinary cars, ordinary grocery stores, a quiet house, a quiet life. She had never wanted men in suits stepping out of black cars because of her. But tonight, she was too tired to pretend the past could stay buried, just because she asked politely. The rear door of the middle car opened. An older man emerged, tall and narrow, with silver hair combed neatly back, and a leather folder tucked under one arm. His suit was charcoal, not flashy, but clearly made for him. He had the steady posture of a man who had spent his life in boardrooms, courtrooms, and rooms where careless words became expensive. He looked at Linda. Then his face softened. He walked toward her, stopped 3 feet away, and bowed his head. Not much. Just enough. Enough for every person under that awning to understand that this was not a driver greeting a client. This was respect. "Mrs. Parker," he said quietly. "I am Jonathan Reed, Senior Counsel for Parker Legacy Trust." Linda closed her eyes for half a second. "Mr. Reed," she said, "this is a very public place." "I understand," he replied. "I would not have come this way unless it had become necessary." His eyes moved briefly to her cheek. He did not stare. He was too disciplined for that. But something changed in his jaw. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine." He heard the old habit in her voice. The answer women give when they have been carrying too much for too long and do not want to make it heavier for anyone else. "No, Mom," he said gently. "You are standing. That is not the same thing." Linda looked at him then. For the first time that night, her expression trembled. Behind the glass doors, movement gathered. Guests had drifted into the lobby. At first, only a few. Then more. The young hotel attendant had opened the ballroom doors to let someone pass, and the sight of the black cars had traveled faster than music. Inside, Brooke heard the murmur. "What is going on out there?" she demanded. No one answered. Paige moved to the lobby doorway and looked through the glass. She saw Linda. She saw the men. She saw Jonathan Reed holding his leather folder like a judge holding a sealed order. Paige swallowed hard. "Brooke," she said, barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." Brooke pushed past her, still gripping her stained dress. Daniel followed without thinking. So did Charles Whitman. So did Margaret, whose smile had finally disappeared. They reached the lobby just as Jonathan opened the folder and handed Linda a document clipped with a blue tab. "The board has called an emergency succession meeting for Monday morning," he said. "Your brother's estate has cleared probate. Under the trust language, you are now the primary voting heir. They can delay formal seating, but they cannot proceed without your consent." The words landed softly, but through the glass they hit like thunder. Charles Whitman froze. He knew the language of money. He knew trusts, voting control, probate, consent. Those were not decorative words. Those were power words. Margaret leaned toward him. "What trust?" she whispered. Charles did not answer. He was staring at Linda as if her face had changed shape. Brooke stepped closer to the glass, confusion tightening her mouth. Daniel heard the words too, but they reached him differently. Not as money, not as status. As proof that his mother had lived an entire life he had never asked enough about. He pushed through the revolving door. "Mom?" Linda turned. The cold night air moved between them. Her cheek was still red. His eyes went straight to it. And finally, too late, he looked like a son. "Who are these people?" he asked. Linda held the document at her side. For a moment, she saw him at 8 years old, standing in the kitchen in pajamas, asking why the lights had gone out during a storm. She had told him not to worry. She had always told him not to worry. Now there was no gentle way to say it. "They manage the family business," she said. Daniel blinked. "What family business?" Linda drew a slow breath. "My family's business, Daniel. Parker Legacy Transportation. My grandfather started it with one truck outside Savannah. My father grew it. My brother ran it after I left. He stared at her. After you left? Yes. Jonathan stood silent beside her. The security men did not move. The cars idled softly behind them. Inside the lobby, Brooke's face drained of color. Linda looked past Daniel for one brief second and saw all of them watching now, the bride, the parents, the guests, the hotel staff, the people who had said nothing when cruelty had been easy. Then she looked back at her son. I walked away before you were born, she said, but walking away from power does not mean it disappears. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came, and behind him Brooke whispered the first honest thing she had said all night. Oh my God. Daniel stood in the hotel drive with his mouth open, but nothing came out. He had known his mother as a woman who clipped grocery coupons. A woman who drove the same used sedan for 12 years because it still ran fine. A woman who washed plastic containers and reused them until the lids cracked. A woman who said no to vacations, no to new coats, no to anything that cost more than it had to. Now a senior attorney was standing beside her with a legal folder, and 3 black cars waited at the curb, like proof of a life Daniel had never imagined. He looked at Linda. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out hurt before it came out angry. Linda heard both. I wanted you to grow up free of it, she said. Free of what? She looked toward the hotel doors. Brooke stood behind the glass with one hand pressed to her stained dress. Charles Whitman was already on his phone, his face tight, his lips moving fast. Margaret watched Linda the way people watch a storm coming toward their house. Linda turned back to Daniel. Free of people who treat money like bloodline, she said. Free of rooms where everyone is smiling and everyone is counting. I left that world because I did not want it raising my child. Daniel's eyes flickered. My child. The words reached him in a place no inheritance could touch. Jonathan Reed stayed quiet, but he noticed everything. He noticed Daniel's trembling fingers. He noticed the bride slowly stepping closer to the door. He noticed Charles Whitman lowering his phone, as if he had just heard something he did not like. The night air smelled of rain and exhaust. A valet stood frozen beside a silver Mercedes, car keys hanging from one finger. Somewhere inside the hotel, the band had stopped playing. Daniel swallowed. So all those years, he said. The extra shifts, the late nights, the house payments, the old car. You could have changed all of that? Linda's face did not harden, it sagged. I could have made it easier, she said. Maybe. But easier is not always cleaner. He stared at her. She continued slowly. Your father and I built a small life on purpose. It was honest. It was ours. When he died, I kept it because it was the last thing we had made together. Daniel looked away. He remembered his father only in flashes, a laugh in the hallway, a warm hand on his shoulder, a baseball glove placed on his bed. But he remembered his mother after the funeral, her standing at the stove with red eyes, making pancakes because he had asked for them, her hands shaking when she thought he was not looking. You should have told me, he said. Yes, Linda answered. I should have. That simple admission took the anger out of him faster than any defense could have. Behind him, the revolving door turned. Brooke stepped outside. Her face had changed. The anger was gone, or at least hidden. In its place was something softer, careful, newly frightened. She held her skirt up with both hands to keep the wine stain from brushing her legs. Daniel, she said. No one moved. Linda watched her approach. Brooke's eyes flicked to the cars, to Jonathan, to the security men. Then, only then, to Linda's cheek. Mrs. Parker, Brooke said, voice thin. I need to apologize. Linda said nothing. Daniel turned. Brooke took a breath. It caught halfway. I was overwhelmed. The dress, the pressure, everything. I acted horribly. I shouldn't have put my hands on you. The words were arranged well, almost too well, like place cards at a dinner table. Paige had followed her to the doorway and stood just inside, pale and silent. She knew Brooke. She knew that voice. It was the voice Brooke used when she needed a room to forgive her before the facts were discussed. Daniel knew it now, too. He looked at his wife of a few hours and felt something inside step back. You spilled the wine yourself, he said. Brooke's mouth parted. That is not fair. Did you? Daniel, did you spill it yourself? A gust of wind moved through the drive. The flowers beside the entrance trembled. The guests behind the glass leaned in without meaning to. Brooke looked from Daniel to Linda, then to Charles, who had come outside and stopped behind her. Charles spoke first. "Daniel, this is not the place." Daniel did not look at him. "It became the place when my mother was slapped in front of 200 people. Charles's jaw tightened. Margaret touched his arm, warning him to be careful. Not kind, careful. Brooke's eyes shone now, but the tears did not fall. "I made a mistake," she whispered. Linda finally spoke. "No, honey," she said softly. "A mistake is reaching for the wrong glass. What you did had direction." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Brooke flinched as if the slap had come back across the space between them. Linda's voice stayed calm. "You wanted me small. You wanted me embarrassed. You wanted the room to agree with you." Brooke looked down. For the first time all night, she had no audience she could control. Daniel took one step toward his mother. Not enough to fix what he had failed to do, but enough to begin. And Linda saw it. The first movement. The first return. Daniel stood between the woman who raised him and the woman he had just married. And for the first time that day, the wedding felt smaller than the truth. Brooke wiped at the corner of her eye, though no tear had fallen. "I said I was sorry," she whispered. "What else do you want from me?" Daniel looked at her, and the answer frightened him because it was so simple. The truth. Brooke's shoulders stiffened. Behind her, Charles Whitman stepped closer, his voice low and polished. "Son, emotions are running high. We should take this inside, away from guests. Families handle misunderstandings privately." Linda looked at him. There it was. The language of men who did not want justice. Only containment. Daniel heard it too. He had heard it for months, though he had never named it. Keep the guest list balanced. Keep your mother comfortable at a smaller table. Keep the speeches short. Keep the optics clean. Keep Linda Parker out of view. "No," Daniel said. Charles blinked. Daniel turned fully toward him. "My mother was humiliated publicly. We are not fixing it privately." A sound moved through the lobby behind the glass. A small wave of breath. Guests had heard. Staff had heard. The same room that had swallowed the slap was now being forced to hold the aftermath. Margaret Whitman's face tightened. "Daniel," she said carefully, "you are exhausted. This has been an emotional day." He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Yes, it has." Brooke reached for his hand. He stepped back. The movement was small, but everyone saw it. Brooke saw it most of all. Her hand remained in the air for a second, before she let it fall. Linda watched her son with a pain that was not simple. Part relief, part grief, part memory. She had waited for him to move inside the ballroom. He had not. Now he was moving, but the cost had already been paid. Jonathan Reed leaned toward Linda. "Mrs. Parker," he said softly, "we can leave whenever you wish." Linda nodded, but she did not move, not yet. Paige stepped through the revolving door then, pale, shaking, one hand wrapped around her phone. "Brooke?" she said. Brooke turned sharply. "Not now." Paige swallowed. Her eyes flicked to Linda, then Daniel. "I need to say something." Brooke's face hardened. "Paige." That single word held years of command, years of loyalty demanded and rewarded, years of knowing when to stay quiet. Paige almost folded. Then she looked at Linda's cheek, and something in her changed. "I saw the wine," Paige said. The lobby went silent. Brooke's lips parted. "What?" Paige's voice shook, but she kept going. "I was standing right beside you. You picked up the glass. Linda didn't touch you. You tipped it onto your own dress." Brooke stared at her as if betrayal had a sound and Paige had just made it. "That is not true." "It is," Paige said, and now tears did come to her eyes. "And I should have said it in there. I'm sorry I didn't." Linda's gaze softened. That apology was late, but it was real. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. There it was, the truth. Plain, ugly, inescapable. Charles moved fast, his voice dropping into threat. "Young lady, I would think very carefully before making accusations at a private family event." Jonathan Reed turned his head. Just slightly. "Mr. Whitman," he said, calm as a courthouse clock, "I would advise you not to intimidate a witness." Charles froze. The word witness changed the temperature. It reminded everyone that this was not just a social embarrassment. A woman had been struck. In public, in a hotel filled with cameras, with staff, with guests, with liability. Margaret's hand went to her throat. Brooke looked suddenly younger, not innocent, just unprepared. Daniel looked at Paige. "Thank you," he said. Paige nodded, crying now, ashamed of herself and relieved by the same breath. Brooke turned toward Daniel. "Daniel, please." I panicked. I just wanted today to be perfect. He looked at her stained dress, then at his mother's cheek. "You wanted it to look perfect," he said. "That is not the same thing." The words landed hard. Brooke's mouth trembled. Linda took a slow step forward. Everyone turned to her. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The night had already made room for her. "Brooke," she said, "I want you to understand something. You did not hurt me because you thought I was powerful. You hurt me because you thought I was safe to hurt." Brooke looked down. "That is where people reveal themselves," Linda continued. "Not in how they treat someone above them. Anyone can perform respect upward. Character is how you treat someone you believe has no way to answer back." No one spoke. Even Charles looked away. Daniel's face twisted with shame. Linda saw it and let the silence teach him. Not to punish him. To let him feel the weight clearly enough to change. Then she turned toward Jonathan. "I would like to go home," she said. Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, please, let me come with you." Linda looked at him for a long moment. The boy in him was asking. The man in him was finally standing. "Yes," she said softly, "but we are not running from this. We are walking." And together, mother and son moved toward the waiting car while the wedding watched them leave. The door closed softly behind Linda and Daniel, but the sound carried through the hotel drive like a verdict. Inside the car, the world changed again. The noise of the wedding disappeared. The glass held it back. The black leather seat was cool beneath Linda's hands. A small reading light glowed above them. Outside, faces gathered under the hotel awning, blurred by tinted windows and distance. Daniel sat beside his mother, but not too close. He did not know if he had the right. Linda looked straight ahead. For a while, neither of them spoke. The car did not move. Jonathan Reed stood outside, speaking quietly with one of the security men. He was giving Linda and Daniel a moment without saying he was giving it. Daniel's hands rested on his knees. They opened and closed once. Twice. "I froze," he said finally. Linda turned her head slightly. He stared at the partition in front of him. "I saw her raise her hand. I saw it happening, and I froze." His voice cracked on the last word. He hated that. He was a grown man. A husband, at least legally. A man with a career, a mortgage application half finished. A future he had been so eager to step into. But beside his mother, he felt like the boy again. The boy who had broken a neighbor's window with a baseball and hidden behind the garage until Linda found him. "I know," she said. 2 words, no anger in them. That almost made it worse. Daniel pressed his palms together. "You looked at me, yes, and I did nothing." Linda's eyes softened, but she did not rescue him from the truth. "No," she said. He nodded once. Hard, like he deserved the blow. "I'm sorry." The words came small at first, then again stronger. "I am so sorry, Mom." Linda looked down at her hands. The knuckles were lined, the nails trimmed short. Hands that had signed school forms, fixed buttons, held cold washcloths to fevered foreheads. Hands that had once carried him sleeping from the couch to his bed, even when he had grown almost too heavy. "I believe you," she said. Daniel exhaled, but relief did not come. "But sorry is not the whole thing," she continued. He looked at her. Linda's voice was quiet, steady, almost tired. "When someone you love is being harmed, silence becomes a decision. Maybe not the decision you wanted to make, but still a decision." Daniel shut his eyes. The words entered him slowly, not as punishment, as medicine, bitter, necessary. "I was embarrassed," he whispered. Linda did not move. "By me?" The question was gentle. That made it unbearable. Daniel's face twisted. "No. Yes. I don't know." He opened his eyes, full of shame now. "Not because of you. Because of them. Because I wanted that life to fit. I wanted Brooke's family to accept me. I kept telling myself the little things didn't matter." Linda waited. He swallowed. "The seating chart. The way they talked over you. The way Brooke said you'd be more comfortable at a smaller reception. I heard it. I saw it. I made excuses." Outside the car, Brooke stood under the awning with her arms wrapped around herself. Charles was speaking sharply to hotel management. Margaret kept one hand at her throat, watching the car as if it might open and ruin her life further. Inside, Linda nodded slowly. "That is how disrespect grows," she said. "Most of the time, it does not begin with a slap. It begins when decent people convince themselves that a small cruelty is not worth the discomfort of naming." Daniel looked at her then, really looked. The red mark on her cheek had deepened. He saw the powder she had carefully applied that morning, the pearl earrings, the soft lines near her mouth. He saw the woman who had raised him, and beneath her, another woman he barely knew. A woman who had walked away from wealth, carried grief, protected him, and still somehow asked for so little. "Tell me about it," he said. Linda's brow lifted. The business, the family, all of it. A long silence passed. Then she reached into her handbag and pulled out the old photograph. Daniel at 10, holding a paper trophy. "I was going to tell you after the honeymoon," she said. Maybe that was another way of waiting too long. The car door opened. Jonathan leaned in carefully. "Mrs. Parker, would you prefer to leave now?" Linda looked at Daniel. "No," she said. "Not yet." Daniel frowned. Linda turned toward the hotel. "I walked out because I would not beg for dignity in that room," she said. "But I will not disappear like I did something wrong." Jonathan understood at once. He stepped back and opened the door fully. Linda took Daniel's hand, not for support, but as a mother claiming the son who had almost lost himself. Then she stepped out of the car. The awning fell silent. Every guest watched. Linda Parker stood beneath the hotel lights, cheek marked, dress plain, posture unbroken, and this time Daniel stood beside her. Linda walked back toward the hotel entrance, and the crowd parted before her without a word. Not because they had suddenly become kind, because power had arrived beside her. That was the part that sat heavy in her chest. The same people who had watched her walk out alone now stepped aside, as if the air around her had changed. Men lowered their voices. Women touched their necklaces. A few guests offered small, guilty smiles, the kind people give when they want forgiveness without having to ask for it. Linda did not return the smiles. Daniel stayed at her side. He could feel the eyes on him. He could hear the whispers moving behind hands and champagne glasses. Parker legacy, transportation money, voting heir, billions, maybe. He hated how quickly the room learned to respect what it had refused to see before. At the lobby doors, Brooke stood waiting. Her dress was still stained. Her makeup had begun to loosen around her eyes. For the first time since Daniel had known her, she did not look arranged. She looked uncertain, bare, almost human. Almost. "Linda," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Parker," he corrected. Brooke blinked as if the correction had slapped her pride. Linda placed a hand lightly on Daniel's arm. "It's all right," she said. Then she looked at Brooke. "Say what you need to say." Brooke swallowed. Her father stood a few steps behind her, rigid and watchful. Margaret looked smaller now, no longer queen of the room, just a mother afraid of what her daughter had exposed about all of them. Brooke took a breath. "I was wrong," she said. "I was cruel. I let my stress and my emotions take over, and I hurt you." Linda listened. The sentence sounded polished again, smooth at the edges, safe. Brooke continued quickly. "I hope we can move forward as a family. I know tonight has been difficult, but Daniel and I love each other, and I don't want one terrible moment to define the rest of our lives." There it was. One terrible moment. Linda noticed the phrase, so did Daniel, a moment. Not a pattern, not a belief, not the quiet weeks of trying to keep Linda small before the wedding ever began. Daniel turned to Brooke. "Do you understand why it happened?" Brooke frowned. "I just said I was wrong. That is not what I asked." Charles stepped in. "Daniel," she apologized. "A mature man accepts an apology and handles the rest with dignity." Daniel looked at him. "My mother handled humiliation with dignity. Don't confuse that with your right to move on." Charles's face reddened. A hotel manager approached carefully, a woman in a navy suit named Marcia Ellison. She had been briefed by her staff. She had also already spoken with legal counsel. Her voice was controlled, but her eyes were troubled. "Mrs. Parker," she said, "on behalf of the Grand Harrington, I want to apologize for what happened on our property. We will preserve all security footage and cooperate with any request from law enforcement or counsel." Brooke stiffened. "Law enforcement?" Jonathan Reed stepped beside Linda. A guest was physically assaulted in a public area of your event, he said. Whether Mrs. Parker chooses to pursue a complaint is her decision, but the facts will not be erased. The word assaulted struck Brooke harder than slapped. Assault sounded legal. Assault sounded real. Brooke looked at Linda, and now fear entered her face plainly. Please, Brooke said. Please don't do that. Linda studied her. There were moments in life when a person's true concern revealed itself. Brooke was not asking because she understood the wound. She was asking because she had seen the consequence. Linda's voice lowered. Brooke, I want to ask you something. The lobby went still again. If I had walked out tonight exactly as I walked in this dress, with no cars, no attorney, no trust, no name that mattered to your father, would you be standing here apologizing? Brooke's lips parted. No answer came. Outside, traffic hissed along the wet street. Inside, someone's bracelet clicked softly against a glass. Linda waited. Daniel watched Brooke's face as the truth fought with survival. He knew then, not guessed, knew. Brooke looked down. That was the answer. Linda nodded once. That is what I needed to know. Brooke whispered, I'm ashamed. Linda's expression softened, but only slightly. Good, she said. Shame can be useful if you let it teach you. But it is not the same as repair. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Repair. That word was larger than the wedding, larger than marriage, larger than Brooke. It was the work ahead. For all of them. Linda turned toward Marcia, the hotel manager. Please make sure your staff are treated kindly tonight, she said. They saw more than they should have had to see. Marcia's eyes glistened. Yes, Mum. Then Linda faced Daniel. You need to decide what kind of man you are going to be after tonight. Daniel looked at Brooke, then at his mother. And for the first time all day, he understood that love without courage could still fail the people it claimed to love. Daniel did not answer right away. He looked through the lobby glass toward the ballroom, where the tables still glowed under chandeliers, and the flowers still stood tall in their expensive vases. Nothing in that room looked broken from a distance. The candles were still lit. The band instruments still waited near the dance floor. The cake still stood untouched, white and perfect, pretending this was still a wedding. But Daniel knew better now. Some things could collapse without making a sound. Brooke stepped closer, careful, almost pleading. Daniel, she said, please, we can talk upstairs. Just us, no audience, no lawyers, no parents, just us. Her voice had softened in a way that once would have pulled him in. He had loved that voice. Or maybe he had loved how it made him feel chosen, accepted, invited into rooms he had spent his life believing were above him. Now he heard something else beneath it. Control. He turned to her. When you asked me to keep my mother's toast off the schedule, he said, was that about stress too? Brooke's face tightened. That was different. When you told me she'd be more comfortable at a side table, I was trying to avoid awkwardness. For who? Brooke looked away. Daniel nodded slowly. For you. Charles let out a sharp breath. This is ridiculous. Everyone makes seating decisions at weddings. You are turning normal planning into some kind of moral trial. Linda's eyes shifted to him. No, she said. He is finally naming what was already there. Charles's mouth closed. It was not the volume of her voice that stopped him. It was the calm. People like Charles were prepared for anger. Anger could be dismissed. Calm required an answer. Daniel took off his wedding ring. Not dramatically. Not with anger. He simply looked down, twisted it once, and slid it into his palm. Brooke stared at his hand. No, she whispered. I'm not making a legal decision in a hotel lobby, Daniel said. But I am making a human one. His voice shook, then steadied. I am not going back into that ballroom tonight. I am not dancing while my mother's face is marked from your hand. I am not smiling for photographs. I am not pretending this is a misunderstanding. Brooke's breathing turned shallow. We just got married. I know. So you're going to throw away our marriage over one night? Daniel looked at her for a long second. No, he said. I think this night showed me what I had been throwing away piece by piece for months. The words cut through her. She looked smaller now, but not because she had been diminished by cruelty. Because the world she had arranged around herself had stopped obeying. Margaret stepped forward, voice trembling with panic, dressed as concern. Daniel, think carefully. Annulments, lawyers, reputations, families. This will follow both of you. Daniel looked at Linda. His mother had been followed all her life by things other people thought should shame her. Her plain clothes, her modest home, her quiet work, her empty seat near the back wall. None of those things had made her small. Only his failure had made him feel small. I am thinking carefully, he said. Jonathan Reed glanced toward Linda, then to Daniel. He said nothing, but his expression held approval of the quiet kind. Marcia, the hotel manager, had moved to the front desk and was speaking softly to a staff member. No one deletes anything, she said. Pull the hallway footage. The ballroom angles, too. Secure copies before midnight. A young waiter nearby heard her and stood a little taller. The hotel, at least, was beginning to understand that dignity was not just a feeling. It was also procedure. Evidence, accountability. Paige wiped her face with both hands. I'll give a statement, she said. Brooke turned to her, wounded and furious. Paige, stop. Paige shook her head. No, I should have stopped earlier. I'm stopping now. That sentence moved through the room more quietly than thunder, but it changed something. A few guests looked at one another, ashamed. One older woman near the doorway placed her champagne glass on a table and whispered, "We all should have." Linda heard it. She did not turn. Daniel faced Brooke one last time. I don't hate you, he said. That seemed to hurt her more than if he had. I hope you become someone who would apologize before the cars arrive. Brooke covered her mouth. No answer. Daniel turned to his mother. Can I take you home? Linda looked at him. The anger in her had never been clean. It was braided with love, disappointment, memory, and hope. That was the hardest kind. The kind that did not want revenge, it wanted repair. Yes, she said. They walked out together. This time Daniel opened the car door for her. Linda paused before getting in and looked back at the hotel. Not at Brooke, not at Charles, not at the guests. At the young attendant who had whispered sorry in the hallway. What is your name? Linda asked. He startled. Marcus, Mom. Marcus Hill. Linda nodded. Thank you, Marcus Hill, for remembering I was a person before anyone told you I mattered. His eyes filled. Yes, Mom, he whispered. Then Linda got into the car and Daniel followed. The door closed, and the wedding, behind them, finally understood what had ended. The car pulled away from the Grand Harrington Hotel with no music behind it, no laughter, no rice thrown in celebration, only silence. Daniel watched the hotel shrink through the rear window. The gold awning grew smaller. The guests became shapes. Brooke was still standing near the entrance, one hand at her mouth, her white dress marked red beneath the lights. Then the car turned the corner, and she was gone. Linda sat beside him with the old photograph in her lap. Her thumb rested over the corner where Daniel's childhood smile had faded from years of being carried in a handbag. The city moved past the windows in streaks of yellow and white. Restaurants closing, traffic lights blinking, couples walking under umbrellas. Ordinary lives continuing because ordinary lives always did. Daniel looked at his mother. Where are we going? Home, Linda said. He almost asked which one. Her small house on Maple Ridge Lane, or whatever house came with a name like Parker Legacy. But he stopped himself. He already knew the answer. Linda meant the house where she had raised him. The house with the narrow porch. The kitchen table with one chair that wobbled. The hallway wall where his height marks were still penciled under a coat of paint she had never been able to fully cover. Jonathan's car followed behind them. The third car stayed back, a discreet distance, as if even protection could be polite when done by professionals. For several minutes they rode without speaking. Then Daniel said, Was Dad part of it? Linda looked at him. The business? He nodded. She smiled faintly. Your father knew enough. Enough? He knew I came from money. He knew I walked away. He did not know every number, every holding, every family argument. I told him after we had been married a little while. I was afraid he would look at me differently. Did he? No, the answer came quickly, with certainty. Linda looked out the window, and her face changed in the soft reflection of the glass. He took my hand and said, Linda, the person who gives up a throne to sit at a kitchen table with me is still the same person. Maybe more so. Daniel swallowed. He had always known his father was a good man. He had not known how good. Not like this, Linda continued. Your grandfather did not approve of him. Not because Thomas was poor. Because Thomas was free. He was not impressed by their money. That made them nervous. Daniel gave a sad laugh. Dad made rich people nervous? He made proud people nervous, Linda said. There is a difference. The car turned onto the interstate. Rain began lightly, small drops tapping the roof like fingernails. Daniel leaned back and closed his eyes. He saw the ballroom again. Brooke's hand, his mother's face, his own feet planted to the floor as if shame had nailed him there. I don't know what happens tomorrow, he said. Linda nodded. No one does. I might have to undo everything. Maybe. Lawyers, family calls, work, everyone will know. Linda turned to him. Let them know the truth. He looked at her. She spoke gently now, but there was steel beneath it. Do not spend your life protecting a false version of yourself, just because people applauded it. Applause is cheap when the room does not know your soul. Daniel breathed in slowly. The words hurt because they were right. At the hotel, the ballroom had begun emptying in fragments. Guests collected purses, coats, favors with gold ribbon. No one knew where to stand or what to say. The band packed up early. A photographer sat on a bench near the lobby, scrolling through images with a sick feeling in his stomach. He had captured everything. The glass, the slap, Linda's exit, Brooke's face when the cars arrived. Marcia Ellison stood beside him. Do not delete a single file, she said. I wasn't going to, he answered, though part of him had wanted to. Not to protect Brooke, to protect himself from having seen it. Paige gave her statement in a small office near the front desk. Her hands shook around a paper cup of water. I should have spoken sooner, she told Marcia. Marcia looked at her with tired eyes. Yes, she said, you should have. Not cruel. Just true. Back in the car, Daniel's phone began buzzing. Again. Brooke. Margaret, unknown number. Brooke again. He silenced it. Linda noticed, but said nothing. At the next red light, Daniel looked at her cheek. Does it hurt? Yes, she said. The honesty startled him. She touched the mark lightly, but not as much as watching you disappear from yourself. Daniel turned toward the window, his eyes wet now. I'm here, he whispered. Linda reached over and took his hand. I know, she said. Stay here. The light turned green. The car moved forward through the rain, carrying them toward the small house that had always been enough, and toward a truth too large to keep hidden anymore. By Monday morning, the story had already moved beyond the ballroom. Not because Linda wanted attention. She did not. But truth has a way of traveling when too many people have tried to bury it. The Grand Harrington turned over the security footage. Paige gave a written statement. The photographer preserved every image. The hotel issued a formal apology to Linda and retrained its entire event staff on guest safety and intervention. Brooke was not arrested that night, but she received a citation after Linda filed a simple complaint. Not for revenge, for the record. Linda told Jonathan Reed, if I let it disappear, the next woman may not have witnesses. That was Linda. Even wounded, she thought past herself. The marriage did not survive. Daniel filed for annulment after speaking with counsel. He did it quietly. No press statement. No public fight. Brooke's family tried to contain the embarrassment, but money could not turn the cameras backward. People had seen what they had seen. More importantly, people had remembered what they had done nothing about. Brooke sent Linda a letter 3 weeks later. Not a text, not a message through Daniel. A handwritten letter. Linda read it at her kitchen table, the same table where Daniel had eaten cereal as a boy. Brooke wrote that she had started therapy, that she had watched the footage once and could barely recognize herself. That she was sorry not because Linda was powerful, but because Linda had been human all along. Linda folded the letter carefully. She did not forgive Brooke that day, but she did not throw it away. Some repairs take longer than apologies. 2 months later, Linda Parker walked into the headquarters of Parker Legacy Transportation in Atlanta for her first full board meeting as chair. The building stood on Peachtree Street, glass and limestone, with the Parker name set in brushed steel above the entrance. Trucks bearing that same name crossed highways in 9 states. Warehouses, port contracts, distribution centers, pension funds, scholarships, medical benefits for thousands of employees. This was not fairy tale wealth. It was payroll, responsibility, legacy, and now it was hers. Linda stepped out of the car wearing a navy dress, low heels, and the same pearl earrings she had worn to the wedding. Jonathan walked beside her with a folder under his arm. Employees in the lobby turned as she entered. Some knew the story. Most knew only the name. But when Linda crossed the marble floor, no one needed to tell her she belonged there. She already knew. In the boardroom, 12 directors stood. Some were relieved. Some were nervous. Some were still deciding how much of the quiet woman before them they should underestimate. Linda let them wonder. Then she took the chair at the head of the table. The room settled. Jonathan placed the agenda in front of her. Linda looked around at every face. "My grandfather started this company with one truck," she said. "My father made it grow. My brother protected it. I walked away from it for many years. But I never walked away from what it means. No one moved," she continued. "We move goods across this country, but from this day forward, we will also move differently as people. Every contract, every promotion, every hiring decision, every community grant will be measured against one question. Are we seeing people clearly, or are we only seeing what they appear to have?" A director near the far end shifted in his seat. Linda saw him. She went on. "I know what it is to be placed at the back of a room. I know what it is to be dismissed because someone misread my dress, my age, my silence, my worth. That will not be the culture of this company." Her voice did not rise. It did not have to. Power, real power, does not always shout. Sometimes it signs policy. Sometimes it funds scholarships. Sometimes it makes sure the person cleaning the floor has health insurance, a living wage, and a name people remember. 1 year later, Parker Legacy had expanded its scholarship foundation into 3 states. The first new award went to a hotel employee named Marcus Hill, who wanted to study hospitality management. Linda insisted on presenting it herself. Daniel was there that day. He stood in the back of the auditorium at first, out of habit. Then Linda saw him and raised one eyebrow. He smiled, ashamed and grateful, and moved to the front. After the ceremony, he hugged her longer than usual. "I'm still learning," he said. Linda patted his back. "So am I." That was the healing. Not perfect, not quick, but honest. And on a quiet Sunday evening, Linda sat on her porch with tea cooling beside her, watching the light fade across the yard she had chosen years ago. The world knew her name now, but the porch still felt like home. She touched her pearl earring and smiled. She had not become worthy when the cars arrived. She had always been worthy. The room had simply gotten large enough to see it. And maybe that is the lesson worth carrying. Before you judge someone by their clothes, their job, their seat, or their silence, ask yourself what you might be too blind to see. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Would you have forgiven Daniel? Or would that silence have been too much to forget?